All right, hey Google. Okay, before you start, I can't say that. Hello Google. Before you start making sure you respond to every single tweet that talked about the Pixel 4a and its leaks and complimenting me on my sleuthing, thank you very much. Why don't you focus on keep making the Pixel 3a until the 4a comes out, okay? Because discontinuing it and then waiting for several weeks before dropping this one that made no sense. Why did you do that? But yeah, the Pixel 4a has finally come out. The phone that a lot of people thought was going to come out a couple weeks after the iPhone SE, which was now 4 months ago. A little late on that one, but better late than never because this is probably the best Google Pixel phone of all time. Let's begin. So yeah, other than a few typos on the website, which thankfully I pointed out to Google and they have now since fixed, the Google Pixel 4a seems to be a pretty solid package, undercutting what a lot of us were expecting at a $349 price point. Man, I would love to know the profit margins on a phone like this. I wonder if it's a Google Nest Mini situation where they basically lose money on every sale in the hope that they will make money back from you in other ways. Because man, this thing is unbelievably cheap. You got a standard, 1080p 60Hz display, but it is OLED and the screen to body ratio is not bad. Pretty consistent and good looking side bezels all the way around. Little bit of a chin, but nothing too drastic. Just a tiny camera hole punch out in the corner and definitely looks better than the Pixel 3a does, which had much more of a dated looking design, but at least there was no ugly notch. Now we've got the camera hole cut out, which is what people wanted on Pixel phones for so long, and it also happens to be on the cheapest phone they've ever made. Like, wow, that's pretty impressive. And the specs on it aren't too horrible either. The battery's a little over 3,000 milliamp hours. You got 128 gigs of storage by default, which is pretty dope. I think a lot of people are gonna like that. And while the camera sensors themselves aren't that impressive, Google's machine learning and image processing always results in taking really, really high quality photos. But I just have to ask, I'm sorry, why the heck does it have to have a square camera on the back if there's only one lens? Like, what happened there? On the Pixel 3a, you just had your lens and your flash. And on this one, they're like, no, big camera needs to be square because that's how iPhone did it, and we need people to think it's an iPhone. So we put a square camera lens on the back. I don't get it. Is this more expensive? Is this cheaper? Why does it have to look so square? I don't know. But the first pictures I've seen YouTubers take with the Pixel 4a seem to be fairly promising, expected when it comes to stills with the Pixel phone. But of course, because of the Snapdragon chip, the 730, this thing is rocking. You obviously can't get that great video performance out of Pixels, which is to be expected. That hasn't really changed throughout the years. When it comes to rear camera video, it's still limited to 4K at 30 FPS, which honestly, compared to the iPhone SE, which is kind of this phone's competitor, doing 4K at 60 does kind of suck. And at the same time, the front-facing video performance is also not that impressive at 1080p at 30 FPS. So no shocks there. Google is all about the stills, and they don't care too much about the video. And likely the biggest downfall, the biggest issue some people might have is that Snapdragon chip, because first impressions, at least from MKBHD, who has been using this phone for about a week, of course, he's saying that it's definitely not feeling as snappy as he's used to with more flagship style phones, and that processor is likely where Google is skimping out in favor of that display. So I guess the head-to-head comparison everyone wants to make between the iPhone SE and the Pixel 4a is that the iPhone SE is all about price, camera, and processor, whereas the Pixel 4a is all about price, camera, display. So on one hand, you could say, wow, the display looks so much better on the Pixel 4a. It's an OLED, it's more edge-to-edge, there's way less bezel, so that obviously looks much better. But if you think about longevity, the iPhone SE is probably going to easily get 3, maybe 4 more years of software support than the Pixel 4a is going to get. For one, it may not age that well, knowing that the Snapdragon 730 is kind of not up to par with other processors up there. It gets the job done, it covers the basics, but long term, definitely don't expect it to age as well as the A13 chip. But the iPhone SE also has pretty dated and ugly bezels on the front. If you care about that type of thing, yeah, when we're used to OLED and edge-to-edge displays, the iPhone SE looks fairly out of place. But what it does have on the Pixel 4a, despite being $50 more expensive, is it's got water resistance. Pixel 4a still doesn't have that. iPhone SE also has stereo speakers, so if you like sound coming out of both sides of the phone, that's a big win on the SE. That makes a huge difference to me, especially. And also wireless charging, which in my opinion is a huge selling point, especially when we have so many wireless chargers throughout our lives these days, and we have them on desks, we have them them in cars, we have them at coffee shops. They're just becoming more and more commonplace, and to have a phone that's launching in August of 2020 that still doesn't have wireless charging, I guess that's what you should expect when the price is this good, because all of my issues with the Pixel 4a aside, I cannot argue, I cannot disagree with the fact that price point is killer. In fact, if there's anyone out there that wants to buy a new Android and they're on a budget, I think the Pixel 4a will absolutely have to be my most requested phone. Like, yeah, I mean, this is pretty hard to top. The display's good, the camera's good, battery life is great, it's got fast charging, and yeah, I will be picking one up, so I will give you my in-person impressions on it as soon as it arrives. Google loves interacting with my tweets, but they stopped sending me phones a few years ago, which is totally fine. I don't blame them. With the amount of bashing I was giving them, it's totally understandable, and frankly, I'm confused they did it in the first place, but I'm very curious to hear your guys' thoughts on the Pixel 4a. Feel free to hit me up over on Twitter, join my Discord, let's chat more about it there. This is your Alp Sheep here, and all of your comparisons aside, it just comes down to software, okay? So, end of discussion. I'll see you in the next one.